Hello, everybody. This week we're going to be continuing some of the work that we began last week. If you remember, last week we were working on the stock sale problem. We looked at the pseudocode solution to it. We also coded out a solution in Visual Basic, and there are videos in the Unit 2 folder, I believe, that show the solutions. After we completed those solutions, I challenged the class to kind of think about that problem maybe a little bit more in depth, because one of the challenges of solving that one was reading kind of what I will call a not optimally worded problem description, right? And a lot of you guys pointed that out, and it's like, is this what you mean, or is that what you mean? And really the whole point of that, as I told you here in class, was to kind of simulate what you might get when you're working in a real environment with a real client or a real internal customer when you're building a program, and they're needing something done, but they're not really necessarily sure how to verbalize that and express it in programmers' terms because they're not programmers. So it comes on your shoulders then to kind of give them what they want, even though they might not know how to express that. In some cases, like what we did last week, we did exactly what it required, if you remember. And we provided a way for them to put the input in. The math was right. They got an output of what their profit would be. But then afterwards, we had a discussion about, well, is this really how you would code a stock sale program? Wouldn't you want a little bit more granular detail? I mean, who's to say that if you bought a stock, say about 1,000 shares of Apple, that you're going to turn around and sell all 1,000 at once? Because that's kind of how we wrote our program. It's like all or nothing, right? So there's a different approach to it. And what I'm about to show you is some of the result of some of the discussions that we had in class. I challenged a couple groups here in class. They got together and they came up with their own pseudocode solutions that would kind of expand upon the original solution. So I'm going to show you what they came up with, and then I'm going to show you my flowcharted solution that actually is a little bit more granular in detail. And I'll make that visible in the course shell as we proceed. And then after we do that, we're going to go ahead and we're going to improve the actual program to include those changes, and we're going to learn about a couple of new interface features. All right, so that's kind of where we're starting out our day. All right, so why don't we begin by taking a look at one that was emailed to me. So one of the groups got together, and this was the pseudocode they came up with. Now, some of the way that they wrote this, and you guys will remember what your logic was, it's a combination of a few different people thinking about the same problem over a course of like 10, 15 minutes. So chances are if they sat for maybe another 20 minutes, they'd probably hammer it out a different way and use different syntax. But they started taking and recognizing the fact that they'd probably be creating some variables inside the program and started naming things a little bit more in that fashion. And this is what they came up with. And what we were trying to get them to do is to understand that basically when you buy a stock, really what you're buying is you're buying a number of stocks at a particular price. And what we were hoping to do is actually express that as two distinct terms within the program, separate variables, separate portions of an equation, and then when we sell it, that we would do the same thing, the number of sold at a certain price. Because that way, if they only sold a portion, they wouldn't be paying on a commission on the stuff they're not selling, just on the stuff they're selling. Yes, and there would still be a profit involved. It would just be a profit that was relative to the total that they sold. Right? So some of the math is a little bit different. And whether or not you think that this solution up on the screen right now achieves that, I'm going to let you determine it. But this is what the one group came up with, and this is just a refresher. The people here in the room know what I'm talking about. The other group did their work up on the board, and this is what we came up with in that solution. And you can see they have a little bit different approach. So let's just study that, if you can even read that in the back of the room. All right. And then finally, I'm going to show you my solution here. So as I show you the solution, I will let you know it's going to be located at the bottom of the Unit 3 folder. Right now it is not visible, but I'm just about to make it visible. Now this isn't something that you have to create and submit. I'm basically telling you this is already solved, so I'm showing you the solution, and then we're going to adjust our program to match this flowchart. So let me just flip the switch here, make it active. And now if you're at the very bottom of the Unit 3 folder, you'll see this flowchart. Now the other thing I'm going to do is I'm also going to bring up the flowchart from the previous unit, which is this one. And then I'm just going to split screen here so we can kind of look at both of them side by side and do a comparison. So the short version is indeed pretty short in comparison. I mean, that's basically the whole thing, right? And the short version's on the right-hand side. And if you're curious about how I created that, we used to use a piece of software that was intended for pseudocoding, where it allowed you to create the flowchart shapes and then put in variable names and do math, and then you hit a button and it would actually run like a real program. It's a program called Visual Logic. It was a teaching tool, basically. But these are kind of remnants from that era, if you're curious. All right, so for right now, I'm going to zoom in on this one just a tad. And let's just do a comparison here as to the difference of what's happening in the two different versions. So if you look at the right-hand side, that's the short version. We began by getting two inputs, the purchase price and the selling price. And those corresponded to two boxes on the form that we created. On the left-hand side, though, notice that I actually created two inputs that would correspond to this first piece. So, and notice how I named it, because I wanted to be really specific so I wouldn't confuse the variable names when I actually started to create the software. I created one that was called buy price per share, so $10, and then number of shares purchased, so you bought 100 shares, just for example. I went ahead at that point and right away I did some math to show you that really the purchase price is a combination, or really an expression, of two different terms multiplied together, right? Number you bought times the price you bought them for, that's the purchase price, right? And whether the client knows it or not, that's what they did to get to that point. So wouldn't it be nice to not let them have to do the math on their own and input it, but rather give them the input fields right inside the application where they can do it themselves and let the software do it for them. All right, so that's that. So basically, this first box really breaks down to these three. And then when I pseudocoded this, now mind you, when I pseudocoded this originally, we were using this program, and right at that point, we thought it was a good idea when we did this in class a couple years back to give an output to the user right away to indicate this is what you entered. You entered in 10 shares at $100 a share or whatever, and we just output that back to the screen. Okay? So if you were writing the pseudocode today, would you necessarily put this in this spot? No. In fact, what I'll tell you, when we do the actual program building, that information will be reiterated at the bottom with all the other outputs. Is that clear? Okay. From there, we asked them for two more inputs, the number of shares sold and the sell price per share. And then once again, we did the math, and then, so basically these three boxes here correspond to this box. And then at that point, really you have all the inputs they're going to give you, you already have. So then you can start to do all the same math that you were doing before. Calculating the commission is still based on the selling price. So that box is the same. But now we have a little bit of a conundrum in terms of the logic of what we're doing, right? So if I bought 10 shares at $10 each, that's $100 spent. Price goes up to 20, and then I decide I don't want to sell all of them. I'll just sell half of them and bring in a profit, and I'll keep the other ones. Maybe it'll go up some more. So what I would do at that point is I would say, let's say I sold 5 shares at $20 each. So that gives me $100, well, that's selling it. But if I'm going to determine the profit, I need to know what I bought those for originally, right? So I would take that original purchase price per share times the number that I'm selling. So I would take the $5 times the original 10, or the 5 shares times the original $10, and I would know that those cost me 50. But I got lucky, the price doubled, and I'm selling them for 100. So that's a separate calculation. And we know what the sell price is because the sell price has already been determined here. So the number of shares I sold times what I sold them for five shares at $20 each equals 100. So then I can just take that sell price, put it into my same equation, really isn't much different, and then I come up with a profit based upon those shares. So I sold them for how much? 50 times 20 is 100, but they cost me 50, so I made $50, right? What's the commission on that? Right. And then if you're intelligent, you'll also notice that the commission is based upon the sell price, based upon what I sold. So 50 times 2 is what? $1? What's 2% of 50? $2.50? Well, how much did I sell it for? See, this is a trick question. I'm having you think here. All right. But the commission is based upon what we sold it for, right? What did we sell those shares for? 5 times 20 is 100 times 2%, $2, right? Are you guys seeing the conundrum here? So it's like you got to make sure that the numbers you're getting back are the right numbers. So the only way you really are going to be able to do that is to create the formulas and make sure the formulas are right. But we should probably figure that out because really, if we sold them for 100, the original cost of them was 50, and we're also subtracting 2, so we're subtracting 52 from 100. We're left over with what? $48 would be our profit. Now, if that doesn't make sense to you, I'll show it to you as we build the program. So then what we do, once we have all that figured out, it's calculated, then we just do some verbose output, meaning as much detail as possible. People like detail when they're looking at statements that are financial. They want to know how many, how much, total, whatever. They want all the details. And so to do that in our program, what we're going to do is we're going to create a different kind of output box instead of a text box. We're going to create this thing called a list box where we can put a whole bunch of text in it and get more detail printed up on the screen. The technique's a little bit different, but the concepts are basically the same. All right. Anybody have a question on this before I proceed and start writing the program? Everybody's good? We got some kind of like test numbers to think about. You know, and honestly, maybe before I even code that, maybe a real smart thing to do on my behalf here is to actually maybe just bring up some sort of a scratch pad here I can write on. Just bring up regular old notepad. And then I'm just going to kind of go through those equations and then have it there as a model. So I'm just going to follow this flow chart and I'm going to put in some numbers, okay? So I've got buy price per share, spelled correctly. And what do we say? $10? And shares purchased, we said 10. So then the purchase price, based on the math that we see on the left there, is a total of $100. From there, we got the input of shares sold. And what I'm going to do here is, you know, it's probably good to kind of put put them in the same order. Maybe the quantity should go first and then the price. That's just a thought. Maybe it seemed to make sense. Number of shares that we sold, we said we sold 5 shares. And then the sell price per share was $20. We got really lucky, it doubled in price. And so the actual sell price was $100. Looking at the next set of equations here, well, we can figure out commission. The commission equals the sell price times 0.02, right? So that comes out to be $2. We all agree on that. And then profit is equal to basically $100, what we sold it for, minus our original cost. But we have to figure out original cost, right? Original cost was equal to the shares sold times the buy price per share. So in this case, it would be 5 times 10, right? I just want to make sure you guys are on board here. So then that original cost works out to be $50. And then we need that for the profit equation. So the price we sold it for, that's the $100. The cost of those shares was $50, and then the commission was $2. So therefore, our profit equals 48. Okay, so now the reason I do this is both to test the equations, make sure all our logic is right, and then when it comes time to run the program, I have a set of numbers I can type in, and I know what should come back. And really what would be good is to have several sets of numbers to test to make sure that it's right. And really, you don't want to be figuring this stuff out when you're writing the code. You want to figure this stuff out in advance. And it's a common mistake I see young programmers make, especially when they're enthused about writing the code, is skipping the whole problem-solving process. And you know what? When the program's simple, you probably can. It's a fairly simple program, but this is certainly more complex than the first one. But when you get to a problem that gets super complicated, there is no way you're going to be jumping right into the code and then just say, yeah, those numbers must be right. The computer said so. Well, no, the computer's doing what you told it to do. If you told it to do the wrong thing, it's doing the wrong thing. Then you don't want to, have that piece of software out there messing people up. So those are our sample values. I'm just going to pull those off to the other screen right now, and we'll get started up with Visual Studio. So I'm going to go ahead and launch Visual Studio. We're using Visual Studio 2015. And before I go ahead and do anything inside of here, we're going to talk a little bit about file management. Okay? Because one thing we don't want to do is take the work that you did for the original version of the stock sale problem and destroy it, right? Well, the good news is if you already turned it in and you did what I know at least one person in the room did, because he already asked me, and that is started improving it, but didn't keep a backup copy of the original, started changing the one that he had, then you can't really step backwards. But the nice thing about submitting it to Blackboard is if you turned it in the simple form, I have a backup for you. But what I'm about to show you is really kind of a smart practice. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually go out to my file system and I'm going to locate that project. And it's not on my desktop, it's in my Google Drive here somewhere, which is also on the other screen. So I'm going to my Intro to Programming, summer of 2017, and there's my stock sale problem. Now, that's the simple version, right? That one's all done. It works just fine. You know what I'm going to do? I'm not going to touch it. In fact, even if I was going to work on that program instead of the improvement that I'm going to do, if I was to begin work on it today, you know what I would do? I would right-click, I'd copy, and I'd paste it back into the same folder, and I have a safe copy. That is like the simplest way to make sure you create versions of your work. There's other methods to do that. And what I might even suggest is that you name it like something, let's see, original, short version, maybe even put a date on it, if that works for you. But for right now, I'm just going to say, for my intents, short version. You call it whatever you want. But make a backup. All right, there we go. I'm not sure why I did that. Probably because I tried to change it too many times. All right, so now that I have that backup copy, I can proceed, right? And actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to make another copy. It seems ridiculous, right? I'm going to paste it back. And guess what I'm going to call this one? Yep, long version. All right, now that we have safe copies, I am going to be working on the copy that says long version here. So I'm going to just double click the folder and open it up. And what I can do right from this folder is if I double click either the solution file or one of these project files, these VB project ones, that will open it up into Visual Studio directly. So that's an alternate way to open things. You don't want to try to open up any of the application components individually. That'll be problematic. And of course, you can always open up the application from the Visual Studio interface and find it that way. All right, so I'm going to open it up manually from the folder just so you can see that you can do that. Here's the solution file. We'll let that pull up. All right, and now it is open. There's nothing up on the screen. That doesn't mean there's anything wrong. It's just all right here. If I click on the form, give it a double click, it'll pull it up. So you guys remember all that? And then what we're going to do is we have that pseudocode we can refer to, and we already know that we need to do what? We need to add some boxes and probably rename a bunch of things. So this is all about being systematic about how you proceed. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at that pseudocode as our guide. So I'm going to bring that up on the screen once I find it here. There it is. And go right up to the top of it. And I see how I have my variables named, and I also know how I have all my labels and text boxes and all that stuff named. So in order to make sure that it follows through consistently, I'm going to be really methodical about how I change the names. So I'm going to keep this file handy so I can refer. And the first thing that we're going to do is we are looking for the purchase price of the stock, but that's now expressed as two different items. So what I'm going to do here actually is I'm going to actually make my form larger to begin with, and then I'm going to grab most of the stuff here at the bottom. You can see I'm drawing a selection, just a click, a drag, and I'm going to grab everything from here on down and just kind of move it out of the way. In my pseudocode, I have buy price per share and shares purchased. Now, right away, I know I need to add some stuff, so let's click Toolbox open. I'm going to pin it for right now. I'm going to expand the Common Controls area. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add a label, which I'm going to put here. And I'm going to add a text box, which I'm going to put here. All right, so back to the pseudocode. I'm looking for the buy price per share. So I might actually just kind of reword this first label. So I'm going to click on it to just change the wording here. I'm going to say purchase price per share. Then I'm also going to scroll up to the top and change the label. and it says label purchase price, and I'm going to add to it once again per share. Now, when I was doing that like mock walkthrough, which was this, I decided it seemed kind of better to have the purchase price or the number I bought first. So this new one that I'm just about to add, I actually want it to appear above this one. So I'm going to highlight these two fields. So I'm just going to do click, drag, and select, and then move them down. And then I'm going to fix this one. So with this one, that label is going to correspond number of shares purchased or quantity of shares purchased, something like that. That's what my label will say. So I'll highlight the label. I'll find the text box. And remember, I'm in alphabetical sort mode here. That's why I can find it so quick. And that label is going to read number of shares purchased. And now I want to go up to the top here and give it a name. And remember, our conventions are LBL. And I might do something like QTY, or maybe I'll do NUM, NUM of shares purchased. And I know that's a long name, but it is kind of a thing that they're pushing out in the coding world these days. Be verbose with the name of the objects and the variables so that when you look at your code, you can understand what you're looking at. If it makes sense to you, that's great. But I would prefer you get into that habit. So that's the label. But we also have a new text box, right? And that new text box is going to hold the number of shares purchased, but it's a text box. So let's just call that txt num of shares purchased. All right, I'm going to now move back down to this one, which is the purchase price per share. We already labeled that and changed the text, so that one's okay. But I do want to revisit this text box now because now it's going to have a little bit different meaning, right? It's not like the total purchase price. And you see when I click on it and I look at the name, the text is purchase price. But really it's purchase price per share, right? And since that's going to be really close, actually I'll leave that like that. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do that. Purchase price per share. And everything else should be okay. And now I'm going to move it over and try to line them up a little bit. Okay, so hopefully you were successful in making those changes. And just to reiterate, we did add a new label and a new text box. We went through and we renamed all of these objects to make sure it matches what is the use for the object, so we're not deceived by how we named things previously. And now we're going to make that same set of changes to these boxes here. Once again, we're going to need another label. I'm going to put that right here. And another text box. And I'm going to put that right here. May as well try to line it up right away. In this label, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the text number of shares sold. I'm going to name the label LBL num of shares sold. And then the new text box, I'm going to name accordingly. It'll be txt num of shares sold. I'm going to take this next couple of items, the number or the selling price one, and we're going to change that. Oh, did not mean to do that. So you see I just accidentally double clicked, and I'm just going to delete it because it put me right into the code. I didn't mean to do that. So I'm just going to kind of straighten this out a little bit. And I'm going to change this text because that's not really what it should be. In fact, what that should be, selling price per share is appropriate. And then in terms of the label, it's not selling price. I might just say sell price per share. And then this is one of these things, once again, that if you really want to be a good pseudocoder, you start like, naming things certain ways, and it's probably not a bad idea to follow what you're doing there. So if you pseudocode real well, come up with good variable names, you can just move them right over. I'm kind of dynamically adjusting because I'm dealing with something that was already there. Now, the other thing that we're going to do is we are going to change our output mechanism. If you guys remember, we created two labels to explain the output and then two labels to hold the output, two of which you can't see because we didn't put any text into them. And then like once you run the program, it puts the text in there. But I already told you that what we're going to do now is we're going to output to a different kind of mechanism. We've learned how to output to a text box. We learned how to output to labels, and now we're going to output to what they call a list box. But in order to do that, I need to make some space for it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to delete those two things. Actually, four things. Four labels, all gone. If you can't see the extra two, just take your selection and make it real large, and you should be able to find it. And then once I have them all highlighted, I'm just pressing delete, and they all go away. Now, I am going to create a list box, and a list box is kind of like a text box, but it allows for multiple lines of text. And I want to have enough room for it. So I kind of align these pretty nicely as a group. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab them, and then I'm just going to move them up a little bit, and maybe even slide them off to the side, maybe something like that. And then I'm also going to take my button and move it down. All right, so if we're going to add a list box, we want to just grab one from the menu here. So I'm just going to grab it. And this time, instead of just dragging and dropping it, watch what I'm going to do. I'm going to click on it. And then when I come over here, my cursor turns into a little plus sign. And then I can actually draw the shape I want. So I'm just going to kind of make a larger box. And I think something like that will work. You want me to repeat that? All right. So I just clicked on list box once, not double, and then it turns my cursor into a little plus sign, and then I can just draw the shape of it I want on the page. This, of course, will need a name for the object. So, well, this is a list box. We've learned how to do like TXT and LBL, right? BTN for button. What do we do for a list box? Sure. That works for me. And that's actually the convention, LST. All right, so that's LST, and what's this going to be? Output? How about that? That's going to contain all of our output in one box. So I'm just going to call it output. LST output. Now, if I scroll all the way to the bottom and look for text, you guys are going to see that it doesn't have a text field in the same kind of way, right? So I'm not going to pre-populate it with text. The text that's going to appear there is what we're going to output. And I'll show you the way to do that. All right, so if you've done all those changes, this is a great time to come and hit the Save All button and make sure that your work is saved. And then here in the classroom, we are going to take a break, and then we're going to come back in 5 minutes and continue. All right, now that we have returned from break, I'm just going to do kind of a little quick review of the changes we made. And then I'm going to be clicking through all the different fields here just to show you what everything is named so that we can all be kind of consistent on it at this point. So with the very first label here, it says number of shares purchased. The name of it, I called it label number of shares purchased, or num of shares purchased. The text box next to it is txt, num of shares purchased. Right below that, I have purchase price per share. And then the label is purchase price per share. The text box next to it is just the same thing, txt, purchase price per share. And then I have number of shares sold. That object name is LBL, num of shares sold. Kind of continuing that pattern, of course, we have txt, num of shares sold. The selling price per share, LBL, sell price per share. And then the text box, txt, that doesn't match up. That's a good thing I'm checking it, isn't it? Right? Because selling price actually has a different meaning in my pseudocode. So that's a valuable lesson right there. So we'll call that sell price per share. So see why it's a good idea to kind of like methodically check things? I was pretty confident I had it right. Then I would have discovered it when I was coding. And the reason that that's an issue, just to kind of refresh, is sell price actually has a different meaning, which is going to be a variable that's going to hold the total of the sell price per share times the number I sold. So that's why I made that change. So just to reiterate, that text box is sell price per share. So I changed it from what it was originally. And once again, down here I had two labels with descriptions and two empty labels. I highlighted all four of them. Those were our original output fields. And I just highlighted all of them and deleted them. And then in its place, I dropped in a list box, which allows me to output text. But what's cool about it is I can output more than one line of text. And in this case, I'm going to need to do that. Okay? All right, well, finally, we're going to need to start coding like we did last time. And you can get to the code a few different ways. If you're like me, I already double-clicked accidentally on my form anyhow, but you can double-click the button, and it'll take you right to the code. There's some things on here, of course, that are going to be broken now. And I don't know if you can see at the bottom of my screen, I got a couple of red underlines. And the reason for that is I was outputting my information to something else. And in the process of outputting it to something else that eventually got deleted, now it's throwing an error, and a red one is not a good one. And it says LBL profit output, the label called profit output, is not declared, meaning I don't have it on my form. So I can't output to it. And I know that I was going to output my profit to it, and the same thing is true for the commission output. That's also gone. Now, I don't want to forget that I need to do those things, so what I'm actually going to do is I'm not going to delete that from my form or go typing in list box right now. I'm just going to put a apostrophe at the beginning of the line, which turns the whole line into a comment, so I can still see it and read it, but I'm not going to use it in that form. In fact, I know that where I'm going to be outputting my things is to a list box, right? Well, you know, it's actually not a bad idea to kind of put the list box output in there right away, because it's not that hard to do. And the way that you put stuff into a list box is like this. So like with the labels, you do begin by calling the object by name. So I'm just going to start typing ls, and see how it found it right away, lst output. So I'm going to let that be placed there. And then instead of outputting to the text property, remember the list box didn't have a text property. Remember that? When we were looking at it in the properties box? So what we do is we put in this special command called items dot add. Notice how I found that one automatically, right? And then a set of parentheses. And then you can type in whatever the output is. We'll talk about that. But that's where your output's going to go, is inside that structure. And then every time I want to add a line of text to it, I would just repeat that process. I'll just say list output, and I keep hitting enter instead of tab. I should hit tab. Items tab dot add tab parentheses. Now it wants to have something going in there. It doesn't like it to be empty. So for right now, I'm just putting in empty parentheses. But I do know that I am going to be putting in profit eventually and commission somehow, probably intermingled with a bunch of words. All right. We're going to come back and do that after we make sure all our other code is correct. But this is what we're replacing our output mechanisms with. And from what I'm seeing from my solved version on my second screen here, which you guys aren't seeing, is that I have about 8-10 lines of text that I'm going to output. Okay? All right, let's go back now and revisit all the stuff that's in here and see if there's something that we can change or keep or adjust to make it work with our new program. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to close my toolbox. I really don't need it anymore. And then I'm going to use my Windows key and the left arrow. I don't know if you guys have ever done this before, but if you hold down that Windows key and left arrow at the same time, it does this. It tries to split your screen. Have you guys ever done this trick before? Maybe, maybe not. It works with Windows 8 and Windows 10. It does not work with Windows 7. So on the one side, I'm going to have Visual Studio. On the other side, I think it might be a good idea to actually put in, well, I could put in my pseudocode. I suppose that's okay. But really, I'm kind of using, now that I think about it, I'm really using this more, right, for the names of everything. So I'm just going to kind of slide that over so I can see it. And I'm going to kind of keep the pseudocode here too, because I might need to look at some of the equations I have here. So I'm kind of being strategic about my screen layout. And then if I want to bring that text box back, I can look at that too. So it's going to be kind of a combination, but I want to have a reference point. You know, and for you, if you did it on paper, or if you're more like me where you work with two screens, and I recommend that when you're doing programming, it really helps a lot. I just want to have as much screen space as possible available for the code, so I'm kind of narrowing up this section as well. All right, so now I'm going to revisit all my variable names. And I already know that purchase price actually ended up being a combination of two terms. You remember that? But purchase price as an entity still is a thing. I mean, according to my thing here, purchase price equals buy price per share and shares purchased. And is that what I called these other things? Well, the purchase price is still called purchase price. And I have that here. So that one I can leave, right? That one's okay? Can we agree? But then I do also want to add these two. And I think I'm going to actually make some changes to all of this too. And we're going to talk about this as we go. So it's going to be piece by piece. So in the variable section up top here, I'm going to add a new variable. So following the pattern I have, I type DIM, and then I'm going to use the name I have right here, shares purchased. And now, it is true, if you guys are into stock trading, you can actually buy portions of a share in the stock market, like I can buy a half share. A lot of people aren't aware of that, but you can. But for the sake of keeping the program simple, I'm going to keep that as an integer, a counting number. So we're only going to be able to buy a whole share in our program. So I'm going to put in the data type of integer. But then we're going to have a buy price per share. And I'm getting that right from here. In fact, if I wanted, I'd just come over here and highlight it and copy it, and I can just paste it right in. That's fine. And this time, I'm not going to make it an integer. I'm going to make it a double, because that works better for financial values. Remember that as you see this, the highlights here, they're underlined green, indicating there is a problem, but the problem here is basically I haven't used it in my program yet, and that's fine. So now I've kind of taken care of these three are all present, right? So I'm going to move on to the next section. I'm still going to have one, and here I called it sell price. Here I called it sell price. So I'm going to stick with, well, here I call it selling price, right? I'm going to probably just keep it as selling price because I already have it typed in a few spots. If I did manage to change it, I want you to notice that it's going to start underlining in other places here. So I could fix it. Or I could have just left it right where it was. I guess at this point I've committed myself to fixing it, so I'm going to go ahead and fix all of them. And you can see, remember red underlines are bad. So now that I fixed it, I had 3 spots where I had it, and I fixed all 3 of them, including the one up here. That would make 4 spots. Now my rough calculations here, I started using a couple of extra things. So I'm going to make 2 blank lines here. One for shares sold and sell price per share. And once again, I'm just going to copy this directly. No harm done. And then I am going to add that dim. Just paste it as, type the tab. And now number of shares sold. Same as number of shares purchased. We'll make that a counting number, an integer. Then I'm going to go down to the next line. Add another variable. And this time I'm going to call it sell price per share. Just copy that. Paste it as, and what do you think? Same thing we did with the purchase price, and we'll make that a double. Now, here in both my pseudocode and this like mock-up or whatever is, pretend walkthrough that we did, commission is actually the result of a calculation. But at this point, I'm just declaring it as a variable, and I'm not giving it a value because we are going to assign it a value down below. So that's going to be okay. We can leave that just as is. And remember, we toyed around with doing this at one point. And for right now, I can just leave it, but I don't think we're going to use it, so I'm just going to delete it and save on the space. Now, if you haven't done this for a while, now's a good time to hit the save all. So we don't lose our work. So I think we have all of our variables. Or do we? Yeah, I see you getting that look on your face, and you're absolutely right, because we added some other things here, right? And that was the original cost, we paid for the shares, right? So I don't know what that value is going to be either, but I am going to create the variable for it. and that very likely will be a dollar value, which could have decimal points, so we want to make sure that that is a double. Any others that we need to create? I don't think so. Let me check my pseudocode too. I think we're okay. I don't think there's any other things I need to do. So I think I have all of my variables declared. And now we have to change our input fields, right? Now, I want you to think about this for a second. When we were goofing around with the form before, we had changed the name of our input boxes. Do you remember that? Do you notice that in the code, those changed automatically? Yeah, so when I changed my input box, I don't remember what I called it. I think I just called it purchase price. When I changed the name of it, it went into the code, found it, and changed it for me. Be aware of that. That can be a good or a bad thing. In this case, I would generally say it's a good thing, but it's certainly not equivalent to the purchase price. So here's where we got to be really careful. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at my form now. Once again, I'm going to hit Save All. And I'm looking at this box. This is the number of shares purchased. The box is called num of shares purchased. It's a txt. I'm going to go to my code. So we do have a thing here for shares purchased. So that's what I'm going to type here. Shares purchased equals that text box, txt num of shares purchased. See, it just happens to be the one right at the top. How lucky is that? And then dot text so that it pulls in the text from that box. All right, so we got the first box. The second box is the purchase price per share. That box is called purchase price per share, txt in front of it. So once again, well, here I called it buy price per share, so I guess I'm going to stick with that. Equals txt purchase price per share dot text. Now, I think you can already kind of tell that these things here, you know, I'm just going to get rid of them now. I'm just going to recreate all that stuff from scratch because those aren't right at all, right? It might have intelligently changed the name, but it's certainly not putting it into the right place. So I don't want to mess myself up. I just got rid of them. So we got those two taken care of. And basically what happens is once I have those two pieces of information, then I can calculate that purchase price. And what I just did, if you're wondering how I highlighted it so quick, I just double-clicked it. And then I'm going to do a Control-C to copy, or right-click copy, whatever works for you. And then I'm just going to paste it right here. And then that is going to be equal to some math, right? So what's the math? Well, let's see. The purchase price equals buy price per share times shares purchased. So buy price per share, copy, paste, and then to multiply we use an asterisk, and then we're going to multiply times shares purchased. I'm just going to paste that right here. Now technically this is a processing step, right? It really is. And so if we want to like go with these labels here, it's probably a good idea to actually move this down to processing. But you know what? At this point, do I have to? if I want to like follow those labels, I probably should. But if I'm really writing a program, do I really need to do that? Not really. But if you want to try to keep it straight, you might want to label it somehow. So you can go ahead and actually take this, cut it, and put it in the processing area, just so you can see that as a big step, basically. I'm also going to do the same thing with the number of shares sold. So really, it's kind of the same thing that we just did. So the shares sold, copy, paste it into the input section, and then we're going to pull from the text box num of shares sold dot text. Then we'll do the same thing for the sell price per share. Copy that, paste it, equals txt. Which one am I choosing? Agreed? Okay. So I make sure we're on the same page. And the text of that field. Now once again, once we have those two pieces of information, that's right here, then we can do this math. And so since that's really a processing step, I'll say that sell price equals the shares sold, so I can start typing correctly, times the sell price per share, and that should give us that correct value. All right. Once again, great point in time to hit the save all. And notice how we start using the variables and those green underlines go away, meaning it's being used in the program. All right, so if I look at my pseudocode, I did this, I did that, we did this. The output's going to come later. And then we got that completed, we got that input, we did that math, and now we're ready to do this equation, which is the sell price. Well, we still call it sell price, so that's fine, times 2%, 0.02, so you do 2%, equals the commission. I think that's okay. That works. In fact, I can get rid of that blank line there so it's nice and condensed. And then, does the profit equation work? And I want you to look at your pseudocode to answer that one. It does not work. Thank you for shaking your head. You guys were nodding. I'd be a little worried, right? But I'll tell you what, it's easy to overlook, right? And that's why we do the pseudocode. Because really, we don't want to subtract the whole purchase price, because that would be, like if we only, like sold 5 shares, we don't want to discount, the 10 shares, you know what I mean? So what we put here, instead of purchase price, is going to be original cost. So original cost. Do we still keep sell price here? Yes. Do we still keep commission here? Yes. Now the question is this going to be correct? No. Why? Yeah, we haven't calculated it yet. That's a processing step. This processing step was never added in here. And before we can have it as part of a different equation, we better make sure we calculate that. So why don't we make a spot for it here. Original cost equals, and we can just follow what we have here, shares sold times the buy price per share. So it's the original cost of whatever shares that we're selling. Okay, what do you think? Are we good now? All the green lines went away. But notice all the green lines went away before I even added this. In fact, I'll cut it. It doesn't mean my logic's right. It just means I don't have any code errors. And one thing that you guys are going to learn here, which is kind of interesting, is you can have what you call syntax errors when you write code, which is where the code itself's got a problem, like you didn't say something the right way or you forgot to do something. But even if your code is right, you can still have logic errors in your solution. How you get rid of your logic errors is by writing good pseudocode. And if I hadn't written good pseudocode beforehand, this process is a lot more difficult. Because what you're trying to do is solve the problem and write the code at the same time. It really becomes kind of complicated that way. They solve your problem first, pencil and paper, computer, however you do it, and then you can transfer it to code. Question? Good question. So he's saying if I wouldn't have put it in, right, to define it, what would it do? It would automatically insert a 0. And then we'd get some weird number. And we're like, wow, we're making tons of profit. But wait, we would try our test numbers and we would see there's something wrong. And then we'd be trying to trace it down. So yeah, that's a very good question. Okay, the question was, it's for those in the recording, maybe you could hear it or not, does it matter what order I do these calculations in? Absolutely, it does. Because the way the code reads is top down. Whatever's listed first, that's what it does first, and then it does the next step. So if I needed original cost in the equation to make it work right, that needs to be determined before we get to that point. So that's a very good question too, yeah. Coding works top down in order. All right, the last thing that we have left to do, well, actually, great time to save all, so I hit my save all button again, is to actually start doing some output. At this point, we're going to learn both about the list box and about a couple of other little techniques. And I'm going to kind of build it up in complexity a little bit as we go. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to just output the variables directly, like profit and commission, like we did before. In fact, I just deleted them, right? Last time we just took the profit and we put it in the text of the label. We took the commission and we put it in the text of the label, and it was done. But that's not what we're doing, so I'm deleting those. Now we're going to put stuff into the list box, and I already showed you kind of like the general form of doing that. And in fact, what we could do just to make sure that the equations are working correctly is maybe we could just have it output, for example, could I just type in here and say, actually, we'll leave double quotes in there. Your profit is a space. And then I'm going to put in an ampersand symbol. All right, so let me tell you what that symbol is. We haven't formally learned about it in lecture yet, but that is what we call a concatenation symbol. That just means it allows me to take text and attach it to a variable to output it. So I'm going to say your profit is profit. And then finally down here, I mean, we know we were doing the calculations on commission. I can just say your commission paid is space, an ampersand, and then commission. And I'm just going to expand that so it's all in the same line. Once again, I'm going to hit save all. And at this point, you know what? I'm going to run the program and see what happens. Maybe it'll burst into flames. Right? Well, one of a few things is going to happen. It'll throw error messages that we'll need to try to fix. And you know what? If you have stuff that's underlined like green, blue, or red already in your code, When I hit that start button, it's going to throw errors for sure. So you can like actually take care of them beforehand. But right now I have no underlines and all the stuff on the side is green after saving, so that's really positive. So I'm just going to be brave and run the program. And what this is going to allow me to do now is to put in my test numbers and see if they calculate correctly, right? So I have those written out here. So why don't we just pull that up? So for shares purchased, I'm going to type in 10. The purchase price per share, 10. The number I sold was only 5, but that was at 20. And now when I hit that calculate button, all right. Now, is that the profit we expected? $48. And is that the commission we expected? Yes. Okay, so that means our formulas are working right, our inputs are being grabbed correctly, and our output is being put out correctly. So now, really all we have to do at this point, folks, is make that output look better. So that's what I'm going to focus the rest of my attention on. All right. Before I do that, I am going to pause the video so that anybody here in the classroom, and I know I have some looks on faces, which probably means we've got a couple issues to resolve, which is perfectly normal. So I'm just going to pause for a little bit and walk around the room and see where everybody's at. Okay, so the program as is working pretty well right now. We stopped for a little bit here in class to do a little debugging on somebody's program and figured out the problem. At this point, I'm actually going to close the program and I'm going to start to improve the output that's coming up on the screen. Now, I am going to kind of do this in a little bit of a rapid fashion, which probably won't be comfortable for the people here in the classroom because they're all kind of trying to type along and create the software as we're going. I'm actually going to do a little copy paste, and maybe that's not so smart now that I'm thinking about it, but I'm going to copy some output that I've done before. And I think that what's really handy is to give people information that is useful and detailed. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a bunch of these output fields, with items.add and then the parentheses. And then I'm just going to copy that, and it's in my copy buffer, so to speak, so that I can paste it in as I need it. And you know what? I'm probably going to do a whole bunch. So I'm probably going to do this just to have them handy. And yes, I know they're underlining red because I have nothing in there. But what I think might be helpful here is to tell the user something like this. And I'm going to go full screen to help make this easier to see. You purchased space, an ampersand. How many shares did I purchase? Let's see. Shares purchased. And then an ampersand again, and that joins the variables with the text. Put in a double quote and a space, and then I'm going to type shares at, but I purchased them at a certain price, so I'm going to say the buy price per share, and then I'm going to add to it per share. Now, I wanted you to notice a couple of things here as I'm doing this, and I know this is kind of a lot to absorb all at once, because I'm kind of combining a lot of techniques here. But basically what I'm doing is I'm creating a string of text that's going to say you purchased 10 shares, and it pulls it right from the variable, 10 shares at a certain price per share. And then I might say something like, transaction total maybe even put a colon in there or something, I don't know. And then what would that transaction total be? That would be the purchase price. Now all these other ones down here that have empty parentheses, I'm coming down here just for right now, I'm putting in double quotes just to get rid of those red underlines, because if I have red underlines and I try to run it, it's going to give me problems. I know you guys are very quickly trying to copy my code, but I am going to change your screen right now. I'm going to hit the start button and run it. I want to see what it looks like up on the screen. All right. So I'm going to type in, same values, 10, oops. Well, I just hit the tab key to go from field to field, and I can tell that that's broken. So we'll have to fix that. We sold 5 at $20. Then if I hit calculate, all right, so here's an example of the output, and I know that's hard to read. It says, you purchased 10 shares at 10 per share. Now, I did have the question here in the classroom, how do I take that money amount and make it appear like a money amount? Well, there is a little trick to go with that. So let me show you what that is. I'm zooming out just a tad. Don't freak out. Not changing anything. There's a command that you can type in. So anywhere where there's a monetary amount like this, buy price per share, you can type in format. Yep, except if you did like me, make sure you hit that stop button first or close that window. But the command is format currency, capital F, capital C, and then put the variable name inside of parentheses. And since buy price per share is currency, so is purchase price. I'm once again going to type format currency, and this is going to need one extra parenthesis right here. You can see it underlining in red there too, so it kind of gives you a clue. And I'm making those two changes right now. And actually, profits, that is a currency too, right? So I can copy that and I can paste it in right here. Just remember to add a parenthesis at the end. And really, commissions, your commission paid, and I might even say your 2% commission paid is, once again, format currency and an extra parenthesis. I'm going to run it one more time. I want to see what it looks like. Save all, start, same numbers, 10, 10, 5, and 20. Hit calculate, and look at that. You put that format currency in there, and it takes your output and puts it in dollar format. Looks much nicer, right? All right, so I'm going to pull this off to the side. Let you guys just look at it for a second. So if you're at home following along, you can pause the video and copy my code. It's okay while you're learning. But the thing I'm going to do next, folks, is I'm going to go ahead and kind of start adding to this and basically improving it. I'm going to hit the stop button. And I'm going to start just breaking things down in a way that makes sense to me. So I'm taking some of these and I'm moving them up. And actually I might paste that again. And if I do this list output items add and leave just an empty string is what it is, an empty double quotes, it's just going to print the blank line. And sometimes that's actually okay. So I have one section here about the purchase, but maybe I should do one that is about the selling. So in this case, I would say you sold, and kind of really follow the same technique. And then it's going to be the shares sold, so that one's called shares sold, an ampersand. And once again, I'm going to say the number of shares at and an ampersand. And since that's just a number, that's fine. But then I'm also going to list the selling price. And that we'll probably use a format currency there, I would think, right? Since that's going to be a numeric value. And then inside the parentheses, looking right here at my variable name, sell price per share. After that closing parenthesis, but before the final one, put another ampersand and just copy what I did before, per share. And here for the next line, the selling transaction has a total 2. So I'm just going to replace what's in here. So I'll say transaction. Or how about purchase transaction total, selling transaction total. Maybe that's not the best words. And instead of purchase price, it's going to be sell price. Once again, I'm hitting save all. And you know what? I'm going to run it again. I want to see if it's putting the right stuff in there. So run the program. I'll move it off to the side so you guys can still see my code. So we did 10, 10, 5, and 20. Calculate. And let's just make sure that it's putting the right stuff on the screen. You purchased 10 shares at $10 per share. Purchase transaction total $100. Sounds good? You sold 5 shares at $20 per share. Selling transaction total $100. That's good too, right? Your profit is $48 and your commission paid is $2. Is there any other information we might want to put up on the screen? I can think of a couple things. Because if we're selling it, right? Well, if we're selling it, then it already says 100. You know what? That's actually probably enough information. If I wanted to be really granular about it, I could say the original cost of the shares sold. So I could type that in too. And you might want to do that, you know. In fact, maybe I could just take some of these extra ones here and move those up. Oh, that's right, code's running. Hit that stop button. Original cost of shares sold is ampersand. And we already have a thing that holds that value, right? We're going to format the currency. And that one was called original cost. And you know, and when I look at this, I would probably list the commission probably above the profit. So I might put that like here. And I'm not sure I really need this thing here at the bottom, but you know what I might do? I'm going to just put in a little message. Thank you. Thank you for using our program. Brought to you by Microsoft. Oops. I'm just trying to clean it up a little bit. Get rid of a little blank space in there. And then I see I got an extra subroutine down here I don't need, so I'm just deleting it. Folks, that should be a completed program in my mind. So I know that you guys are copying it here in the classroom. So here's what I do for people watching videos. All right, pause the video. This is where they type in, copy out my code. I'm going to scroll down, pause the video, and I'll leave it right here for you guys. And then I'll run it to make sure it all looks good. So let's do that. I'm trying to put it somewhere where it's not going to interfere with what you guys are seeing too much. So we know what numbers work, and we know that the numbers do work. What if we do those numbers one more time? Just to make sure, because we put in that original cost thing. Original cost of shares sold is 50, that's right. All the other numbers we know are correct. The output looks pretty good. I would call this a successful program. The only thing is my thank you appeared. Oh, I have to scroll down for my thank you? That's not good. I'll have to make my form bigger and my list bigger. That's pretty easy to do. All right. I'm going to pause the video here, and before we wrap this up, we're going to add two more things to this program. One is I'm going to adjust the size of that list box, and then I'm going to throw in something else that's kind of cool, which is an exit button. That'd be kind of fun, instead of hitting the red X. And maybe we should even fix that tab order, because right now the tab order is all broken. I don't know if you guys noticed that. I mentioned it before. So when I launch the program, look where the cursor starts. In the second box, and then when I hit the tab key, it goes to the fourth box. Not good. It should start here, then go here, then here, then here. So I'm going to adjust that. All right? All right, let's pause and make sure everybody's all caught up and good. All right, well, we accomplished a lot so far, but there's a couple little finishing touches we're going to put on our program. To kind of make it work a little bit more smoothly. The one thing that I was identifying a little earlier was the fact that when I run the program, I'm not really tabbing from field to field in the order that I would prefer. And what you can do to adjust that, folks, is to actually bring your form up on screen. And then in the properties windows, there are these little fields down here. Each one of these fields, the text boxes that is, and the labels and all that, have what they call a tab index. One thing you need to know is that computers start counting at 0, so the very first box, this is the one I want to really start with, that tab index, what is it set to right now? 11, that's not good. Not if I want it to be the first one. But then you're going to notice that all the items on the screen have tab indexes, including the labels that you'll never even use. But what I always like to do is kind of go through and number them in a way that is logical to me. So even if I can't really tab to it, if I set this one to 0, and then this one to 1, and this one to 2, the cursor can't go here when the program starts on these two, but it'll start here. But I like to order things as like how they're like ordered on the screen. It just makes sense to me. So that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to take this one here. I'm going to set it to 0. I'm going to click on this one, set it to 1. Set that one to 2. Set that one to 3. Set this one to 4. Now, we haven't covered this yet, but if anybody had read ahead in the book, they would be yelling at me right now, telling me how to do it a faster way. So I'm not going to give that away because that's kind of an indicator to me that you guys read or didn't read. But I'm just doing it the longhand way, which is fine. No harm done, because there's not that many things on the screen. And yes, you put them even on things that you don't necessarily actively use. And we even will put it on the button. And that one was 10. 1 or 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10. All right. And the way I'm going to test this now is I'm just going to run the program again. I'll do a save all, run the program, and hopefully when it comes up, cursor's in the first box. See that? And now when I hit tab, it should go to the next box, and then the next one, and then the next one, and then the next one, right? Even though I'm not going to type there. And if I hit it again, it should go to the calculate button. All right, and that just proves that I got that part to work. So that's one thing accomplished, a tab order. There is a more efficient way to do it. If you read the book, it will be unlocked for you. There's a little tool that does it automatically. All right. The other thing that I want to do is I'd like to put in an exit button. And somebody's like, well, you know, if I run the program, in fact, let's run it to show something. If I just type in some numbers, I'm just typing in anything just to make it work. Oh, I did want to make this box bigger. That's pretty easy to do. But then somebody noticed that if I put in different numbers, right? Then it just keeps adding to the list, which isn't really all that good, is it? So how do we fix that? Might even be good to have a clear button. Or I could add something so that every time I hit the calculate button, it clears before it puts anything in there. And that way, if there is something in there already, it gets rid of it. If there's not, it just makes sure it's clear. So let me show you how to do that. It's pretty simple. I'm just going to go back to my code. And then right here for the output box, at the very top of it, I'm just going to say lst output dot items. You know what the command is? Clear. And I always forget, do I need parentheses for this or not? I'll find out. I think it works both ways. So let's find out. Well, I just put them back in. Did you notice that? I took them away and I put them back in. All right, we'll see. Press calculate. If I change my numbers, let's change them to make sure that it's doing something different. So that's fixed. Pretty simple. Now, if you want, you could create another button, double-click that button, and put in add just that code to that button, and it would clear it. That's up to you. If you want to do that, do it. If you don't. That's fine. Either way, it works. I did already identify, I wanted this box to be a little bit bigger, so let me move my calculate button over and just make that a little taller. That should be enough to display the thank you message, I think. But then let's do one more thing. I'm going to bring my toolbox back up on the screen. I am going to add one more button and put it next to calculate, except over a little bit. I'm going to change the text to say exit. And why don't we give it a name of BTN exit. So it has a name, has text. I'm also going to look at my tab order here and see what tab order it put it in. It says tab index 11. My calculate button is tab index 10. That's fine. And then I want to write some code for it, so I'm going to double-click the exit button. And you see how it creates a new little block of code right here that refers directly to the exit button. And then inside here, I'm going to do this. Me, referring to itself. What is me? Me is the program. the form, the program, and the command is close. Really goofy, right? Parentheses at the end. I'm going to save it all. I'm going to run it. This is going to be really exciting. Watch. I'm going to hit the exit button, and it closed. All right, so that's going to summarize all the things I'm going to do to the program today. There are a lot more little interface things that I can do to the program, but I'm going to introduce some of these other things in upcoming sessions with different programs, including how to have hotkeys, how to have an enter key. Somebody asked, couldn't we just set it up so if you typed in the numbers and hit enter, it could do it? We sure can, but I'm not going to do it in this program. There's already a lot being thrown at you and a lot to kind of absorb. But once again, if you read ahead, it's a pretty easy little thing to add. And I'm sure if you Googled it, you'll find it really quick. All right, folks, that ends here. No more on the stock sale. If you complete what we just did here, that basically fulfills that second stock sale VB program, which is improving it. So it's adding more fields, changing some of the calculations, putting in an exit button, outputting to a list box, formatting currency. We also learned how to concatenate text and variables. I haven't even taught you about variables yet. So guess what we're going to do next in lecture? You're going to formally learn about variables after you've already been using them. But I like it because you guys kind of already understand what they do. So when I talk about them, it'll really click into place, hopefully a little bit stronger than if we just talked about them theoretically. All right, this video ends here.